Welcome to Behind the Shadows. I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Enjoy the story.
The sun shone brightly as we finally caught sight of Mask Island. The boat gently swayed on the waves, and the excitement in the air was palpable. I, Mike, looked at my friends, Sarah, Kevin, Lisa, and Tom. We were ready for an adventure, a moment to escape the routine and explore the unknown. The fisherman who greeted us on the beach had an enigmatic, almost ominous expression. "Beware of the masks," he said, his hoarse voice echoing in our ears. "They have a story. And it's not a good one." "Oh come on, that's just a legend." Tom laughed, dismissing the man's words. I wanted to believe it was merely a tale to scare off tourists. The fisherman continued, "The Mask Festival has brought joy to this island, but many have disappeared during the celebrations. No one knows what really happened." His tone sounded more like a warning than a story, and I felt a chill run down my spine. But curiosity was stronger than fear, and we pressed on. Soon, we ventured into the island, discovering remnants of the festival, faded banners fluttering in the wind and wooden structures covered in moss. The place had an air of abandonment, as if time had stood still there. "Where is everyone? It doesn't look like anyone has been here for years," Lisa commented, looking around with a worried expression. "Maybe it's just an exotic spot for us tourists," I said, trying to ease the tension. But as we delved deeper into the dense forest, the feeling of being watched intensified. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the sound of our footsteps. Finally, we found an old cabin, its walls worn and covered in vines. Inside, a collection of eerie masks hung from the walls, each more disturbing than the last. Tom, always the most curious, exclaimed, "Let's try some on. It could be fun." I hesitated for a moment, but the idea of exploring the story behind those masks was tempting. "You have no idea what might be behind this," Sarah warned, but Tom was already grabbing a mask depicting a warrior spirit. The atmosphere seemed to shift, as if the masks themselves were watching us. What had we done? The weight of the air inside the cabin grew heavier, and I could barely contain my anticipation for what the island truly had to offer, even as a small fear began to creep into my mind. The atmosphere inside the cabin became increasingly oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Kevin, always the jokester of the group, decided to try on the warrior spirit mask. The transformation was instant once he put it on. His expression shifted from curious to menacing, and he turned to Lisa, who was just a few steps away. "What do you have to say, you weakling?" Kevin shouted, his voice echoing through the cabin. The aggressive tone was so unexpected that I felt paralyzed. Lisa, clearly frightened, hesitantly replied, "Kevin, calm down. It's just a mask, you don't need to take it personally." But Lisa's response seemed to only fuel him. "You don't understand anything, Lisa. You've always been the weakest in the group." He advanced toward her, and I could feel the tension in the air, as if we were on the verge of exploding into a physical conflict. Mike tried to intervene, but his voice sounded distant to me. It was as if an invisible curtain had fallen between us in that moment. "Kevin, stop it!" Mike exclaimed, positioning himself between him and Lisa. "This isn't you." The scene was surreal. The moonlight streamed through the broken window, casting dancing shadows that seemed to parody our expressions of fear. Sarah, beside me, watched with growing concern. "We need to take off these masks," she whispered, almost like a mantra. The idea of trying on those masks, which initially seemed like a fun adventure, had turned into a nightmare. After several agonizing minutes, everyone decided to put on the masks, driven by curiosity and the need to belong. I hesitated, but the pressure of the group pushed me forward. I put on a mask that represented a dark figure, and immediately found myself immersed in disturbing visions. What should have been a curious experience transformed into a labyrinth of painful memories and insecurities. With each glimpse, I saw moments from my life that I would rather forget. "Sarah, are you okay?" Tom's voice pulled me from my reflection, but the look on his face was distant, as if he too was battling his own visions. I don't know. It's like everything I feared is materializing." The tensions among us increased, and the atmosphere that had once been filled with laughter and stories turned into an emotional battlefield. Each one of us was trapped in our own minds, and what was supposed to be an adventure had become a struggle for sanity. When night fell and we decided to rest, I was exhausted, but the nightmare soon followed. I woke from a restless sleep, my heart pounding. A murmuring echoed in the darkness, and as I opened my eyes, I froze at the sight of Mike, wearing a demon mask, murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. The scene was so surreal that fear nearly suffocated me. "Mike?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He didn't respond. The murmuring continued, and I knew something terrible was about to happen. The mask, with its empty eyes, seemed to stare directly into my soul. What was happening to my friend? What did those masks really mean? The morning light slowly crept through the crack in the cabin, and I felt uneasy. When I finally got up, I noticed Tom sitting in a corner, his gaze distant and empty. He seemed to have absorbed something from the previous night, something that consumed him. "Tom, are you okay?" I asked, moving closer to him. He looked at me, his eyes appearing darker, as if a shadow enveloped him. "I had a vision," he replied, his voice trembling. "I saw the missing people. They're trapped here. The masks. They hold them." Before I could react, Mike, who had put on the demon mask, jumped into the conversation. "Visions? That's nonsense, Tom. You're letting yourself get carried away by this craziness. It's just a mask." He stepped closer to Tom, a challenging look on his face. "You're not better than the others." The atmosphere grew tense, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Mike, calm down. We need to listen to what he has to say." I tried to intervene, but it was too late. Mike's expression shifted into a mix of anger and fury. He seemed to be increasingly under the mask's influence. Kevin, who had been crouched near a tree, suddenly stood up, waving a piece of wood. "This isn't real. This island is just an illusion. I'm going to free it." He began attacking the tree, striking it violently as if he wanted to bring it down. The noise echoed, and I felt that the situation was about to spiral out of control. "Kevin, stop. You're going to hurt yourself," I shouted, but he didn't listen. He appeared possessed by an invisible force, and my fear grew. I looked over at Lisa, who was panting, her eyes wide with terror. "We need to get out of here," she said, almost in a whisper. "Now." I agreed, but when we tried to head toward the beach, reality shattered beneath our feet. The boat had vanished. "No. This can't be happening," I exclaimed, desperately scanning the horizon. "What happened to it?" "We're trapped," Tom said, his voice breaking. Panic began to spread among us, and I knew that with each passing second, the island was becoming more hostile. The masks, with their sinister smiles, seemed to watch us, waiting for our next move. The foreboding feeling that something very bad was about to happen enveloped me like a thick fog. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, but the beauty of the scene only heightened the sense of despair that surrounded us. We walked through the island, each step heavier than the last, as if invisible shadows were pulling us back. The air was thick with palpable tension, and I could hear whispers that seemed to come from the masks, promises of power and freedom echoing in my mind. "Sarah, are you hearing this?" Kevin asked, his eyes wide with fear. He stopped, looking at all of us, as if waiting for someone to say that it was all just an illusion. "Yes, I hear it," I replied, my voice trembling. "But we can't give in to this. We need to distance ourselves from the masks." "You're right," Lisa said, looking at the trees around us as if expecting something to emerge from them. "We have to find a safe place." We continued on, unsure of where to go. Then I spotted something in the distance, a structure covered in vines and moss. As we got closer, I realized it was an ancient altar, with symbols carved into the stone that seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. "Look!" I shouted, pointing at it. "Maybe we'll find answers here." At the base of the altar, I found a dusty journal, its yellowed pages filled with hurried notes. "This diary belonged to one of the missing people," I said quietly, beginning to read aloud. "The masks are portals to evil spirits. They were used in rituals to keep the island's inhabitants under control." "This can't be true," Tom murmured, his expression bewildered. "But what if it is? What if all of this is real? We need to get rid of the masks," I insisted, my heart racing. "They're controlling us. Look at Kevin and Mike." But resistance was fading. Kevin and Mike had vacant looks in their eyes, as if they were lost in their own distorted realities. The tension was rising, and I knew I had to act fast. "Please, let's get out of here." "Sarah, you don't understand," Mike said, his voice sounding different, deeper. "The masks offer power. Why would you want to get rid of them?" "Because they are destroying us," I shouted, frustration spilling over. "We can't let this happen." Lisa looked at us, distressed. "If only we had a mask. Maybe we could protect ourselves." "You can't do that," I pleaded, but it was too late. The idea of putting on a mask now seemed appealing to her, and I knew we were on the edge of a precipice. The island was consuming us, and time was running out. The feeling of claustrophobia grew with every passing second. As I put on the mask, a wave of energy surged through my body. I saw myself reflected in a mirror, but the image was grotesque, as if a shadow had taken over me. Lisa, with the mask on, looked like a distorted version of herself, her eyes shining with madness. "Lisa, stop. What are you doing?" I yelled as she moved toward us, a sadistic smile on her lips. "You don't understand. This mask has given me power." Her voice echoed like a distant chime, a laugh that didn't seem to belong to her. Our bonds were disintegrating under the weight of terror. "You're losing yourself. This isn't you," I implored, but my words felt futile. Tom stood back, his face pale, as if he were battling some internal force. He stepped back, muttering something about a ritual, as if the words were the only anchor in a sea of madness. "I need to figure out how to break this," he said to himself, while running in search of the journal. The sound of a scream cut through the air. It was Kevin, now in a state of fury, attacking everything around him. The island seemed to vibrate with the negative energy emanating from us. "Kevin, no. Control yourself," I shouted, but he was beyond the reach of reason. "You don't understand, Sarah. They're here to get us." He appeared completely possessed, his eyes reflecting a darkness I had never seen before.
With each passing second, I felt more isolated.
Chaos was settling in, like a storm about to break. In the distance, I saw Tom holding the journal, his eyes wide with fear. "I found something. We need to perform a ritual to free ourselves. It's the only way." He was determined, but doubt hung in the air. As I tried to hide, Mike's figure emerged, his presence threatening. "Sarah, come with me. You can't escape." His voice was heavy with a malignant power, and I knew I had to run. He grabbed me before I could get away. "You're not taking me to the altar." "No," I screamed, adrenaline coursing through my veins. He dragged me, reality distorting around us, as the altar loomed closer. My heart raced, and a part of me knew the end was nearing, but there was still a glimmer of hope. If Tom could perform the ritual, maybe we still had a chance. The altar emanated a supernatural light, and I could feel the presence of spirits around us, as if they were watching our every move. Tom stood before the altar, his expression confused, while the masks surrounding it glowed intensely, pulsing with a malignant energy. "Tom, you need to focus. Perform the ritual," I shouted, my voice echoing through the darkness, but he hesitated, his eyes wandering across that surreal scene. Suddenly, the masks began to whisper, their voices intertwining in a terrifying chorus. "Free us, Tom. Join us." They seemed to seduce him, and I realized that not only he, but all of us were being drawn into the darkness. A horrifying vision invaded my mind, distorted faces, lost souls, all the missing from the island crying out for release. "No. This can't happen," I screamed, but my voice seemed to vanish in the air. Tom finally looked at me, his eyes shining with an intensity I had never seen before. "Sarah, I don't know if I can do this." He was fighting against something inside him, something far greater than us. "You have to face it, Tom. We can't let them win." I knew that the only way to save him was to confront the spirits. With a surge of courage, I stood before the altar, facing the encroaching darkness. "I know the truth about the festival," I began, my voice steady. "The missing people were sacrifices, and you can't manipulate us any longer." The mask stopped glowing for a moment, as if they were listening. "You don't understand, Sarah," Tom's voice echoed, but there was something different about it. "I am the descendant of the priest who conducted these rituals. I was chosen." Horror washed over me. "No, Tom. You can't join them." He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the struggle in his eyes. But the mask began to merge with his face, and I knew I was losing him forever. "You have no choice, Sarah. The cycle must continue," he whispered as the darkness enveloped me. I felt paralyzed, caught between the urge to save my friend and the inevitability of that terrible fate. The shadows began to close in around me, and the last thing I saw was Tom's mask, now fully transformed, as the darkness took hold of me. "Tom, no!" I cried out, feeling a wave of despair. Everything around me faded away, and I knew I had to find a way to break this cycle, even if it meant confronting my own fears.
Leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy and see other stories on the channel. See you in the next story. If you dare.